Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are diving back into the world of Star Wars, Andor, through The Art of Andor by Phil Stozak, which, Sarah, you got a review copy from Abrams Books. Big shout out to them for supplying that. I bought my copy from Barnes & Noble, and we came together. We synthesized the takeaways, the ideas, the joy of Andor, and now we're here to discuss all of the ingredients that went into this show. This wonderful, wonderful show.
And boy, was it a joy. Like, this is the second Art of book that we're covering this year as a, throwback to some of our favorite series of late. You can catch our Art of Acolyte and Acolyte Rewatch episode earlier in the feed. But we are back with Andor because, we'll never skip an opportunity to make it an Andor Candor episode. Andor may be over, but Andor still lives on. And diving back into Andor through this book was so much fun. And I learned so much. I was scribbling all over my notebook for days reading this book. And I loved it. I guess it's no surprise to say that you and I both loved it, but it's true. We did.
It is true. All of it. I do want to also shout out, this is not our first time talking about Andor this year, although I think it's fair to say we will talk about Andor at least once a year on the podcast for the rest of our lives. Although we talk about Andor every day of our life off the podcast, just to be very clear about that.
Basically, I was pitching it at a K-pop event recently, so
you're doing the
real.
Lord's work. And by the Lord, I mean Tony Gilroy. But also shameless plug for our Golden Gorgs episode earlier this year in March on the Best of Andor, where we talked about nominees and winners in several categories across Andor. And we have stuff coming up in the next couple months here with Reign of the Empire, Edge of the Abyss by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is set 1 year before Andor. So we got like Andor August coming up here. We are so excited for that book. We're excited about this book. It's a good time to revisit Andor. So if you're an Andor fan, it's your first time listening to us, stay tuned. Go back in the pod feed. You got lots of Andor here.
Yeah. So I think we should start kind of this conversation with just saying who we think this book is for, what we got out of it. What are your thoughts, Brad?
I will say this book is for every Star Wars fan. And I could probably say that about every Art of book, because I think Art of books are my favorite brand of reference book currently, because it's so fun to flip through and not only see all of the used and unused concepts and to see how things were ideated and iterated upon, but also I think the strengths of these books is the actual behind the scenes making of, which we'll talk a lot about today on the episode. But I think this book felt really in the style of a J.W. Rinsler book. And if you haven't read those as a Star Wars fan, those are also a must own. But this book, really, especially if you're an Andor fan, you got to go out and buy this like yesterday, because I think as a, especially in the absence of an Andor season 2 Blu-ray, which I'm still waiting for. And when we look at physical media, this is something physical media wise that you should own and be able to flip through and reference and appreciate all of its glory, every single spread, every single piece of artwork, Tony Gilroy's foreword, Phil Stozak's intro and outro. It's just like a beautiful kind of celebration of the show. And it really just puts into perspective everything in this book is the reason why I love the series. And Phil Stozak gave word to that feeling through his book.
Yeah, I have to say, like, as a reader and a Star Wars fan, and you talk about, ownership and physical media, and I agree with all of those things. And what I have done in the past as well, in addition to having some copies that I've owned, is requested them at my library, or my library already got them, and then I checked them out from the library, and then I was like a library icon. I felt so cool. I felt so iconic getting my big coffee table book from the library. So heck yeah. But regardless, like I agree with you. I think every fan should pick this one up, should give it a go, because there's so much information here. And I think that what these Art of books do really well is two things. one of the things that they can do really well is here's all the versions of a thing until we got to the concept that we used. And there have been so many great examples of that across the past 10 years of these art of books. But one of my favorites is from The Acolyte with all of the strangers mask concepts, and they're all terrifying. They're all so scary. But it was a great way to like say, okay, here's how we got to the final design and what we changed. The other thing that these books do really well, and I think that this book in particular is an incredible resource for, is here's how it was made. Here's how the whole thing was made. And here are the behind the scenes details that, we can provide through interviews and logs and all these sorts of things. And I think this book in particular is really, really good at that. And I think because of the scope of this show, right? Like it's covering 2 full seasons. It's covering 8 movies worth of time. In A Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens, Rogue One, all the Solo, all these above, right? In these art of books, they can dive a little bit more into the here are all the versions of a thing, because there are only so many concepts you can do in 2 hours. Multiply that by, or 2.5 hours, multiply that by 7. And that's what they've put in this book. And I also think that I remember seeing the price of this book and going, whoa, it's a little more expensive than usual. Book inflation, which is always my cry whenever I see that a book is more expensive than it used to be. But we are at almost 300 pages of goodness. And I had to think about it across 8 movies worth of time in a television series. And so this book is just so good at the behind the scenes, A, B, C, D, Z. Here's how we all put this like gargantuan project together, which is awesome. It's so cool. It also makes me wish I could get like we go through all the planets, but it also makes me wish I could get like the book for every single planet or location we go to. Give me the 200-page book for each of them.
Yeah, I think this is the largest, or one of the largest, if not the largest art of book from Abrams, which I think speaks volumes to everything on the screen is in this book in some form or fashion. And that's pretty incredible. It's also just, this book really underscored how much of a miracle the show was. And we'll dive into the specifics there. But like when you look back at Andor and the economic environment that it faced to be made, the global pandemic environment, the strikes, all of it, like it's incredible that we got a show that was still as good as it was, despite basically everything going against it in some ways. And that's so incredible. And I also think that speaks to the perseverance of Tony and crew to not cut corners and to stick to a vision and really push through that adversity. And I just love that it's all captured here, and to tell that story of like, we pushed through and created something that is beautiful and will be timeless and will be the thing that we're talking about in Star Wars when you and I are in an old age home. Like in 70 years, we will still be talking about Andor. We will still be talking about Andor at Star Wars 100. If we live that long, hopefully.
Oh, I hope that we're going to be like 100 years old and talking about Star Wars in our old folks' homes. That'd be so great.
Can't wait for that the FACPOV Andor book in 2072?
Oh, yeah.
Celebrating 50 years of Andor. I'm going to text you that day and be like, yo, it's been 50 years of Andor.
Current and future editors of Star Wars books are shaking thinking about the prospect of doing that sort of project again. And they're like, oh no, it's too big. It's too big of a project.
You thought we would stop at 8 movies on screen. What about 8 movies off screen in book form?
Yeah, actually, yes. I'll
take 10 copies.
That's exactly right. Okay. I think what we should outline today before we jump into our conversation is like, there's a lot of ways to talk about this book. We could pick out some of our favorite little tidbits or talk about the bigger picture or kind of just go through this sort of overview. But we decided today that we wanted to take the timeline of events that we learn in the book and kind of talk through all the crazy stuff that happened to make this show happen. And we'll sprinkle some tidbits in here. So I hope that whether or not you've had the opportunity to read the book, that you'll join us for this conversation and then go pick up the book or follow along in the book with the accompanying art and learn all the incredible information from all the artists and creatives, because there is so much here that we're going to talk about, but also so much that we're not going to talk about. These books are just treasure troves.
So much to dive into. We could really be podcasting about this for, I mean, you know us, listener, if you've been a long time traveler along with us, we could be here for 7 hours.
We really could. We
got to better understand the assignment because we're getting old. It's getting late in the nights, working long days, and we got to get to bed at some point. So we're going to go through. Let's start with the blueprint, the mother of it all. Rogue One, 2016, the OG. I think the craziest thing that was really put into perspective with Rogue One in this book is reshoots happening in June and July of 2016, concurrently with The Last Jedi being filmed, which would not be released until December 2017. And we all know there was behind the scenes stuff that happened on Rogue One. Tony came in. I know Tony is very, very respectfully coy about it and doesn't want to like dive too much into the details there, and I respect that. But getting that kind of time frame there to be like, wow, we were months off this movie coming out doing reshoots. Those reshoots are probably like the impetus for the show even existing in the first place.
Yeah, I remember it being 2016, this being a little bit before I really dug into fandom, and certainly not at a time when I was like aware of what was going on behind the scenes, in the same way that I have been over the past, 8 years, 10 years or so. But somebody was like, oh, who all directed Rogue One? And I was like, oh, it was just Gareth Edwards, And somebody was like, no, there's been a bunch of reshoots on that movie. They got another guy. And I was so little young me was so, what? What are you talking about? And so now to be here all these years later and kind of like learning more about Tony's contributions then and now, and learning that according to Diego Luna, Cassian Andor was one of the characters that was most changed in the process of reshoots, and that the Rings of Kefrine, that whole first sequence, was added 6 months before the movie came out. What? Maybe we knew this before, but not me.
I want to ask you, how do you think of Cassian Andor differently without that scene?
I mean, that scene was 100% the moment when I was like, oh, we've got a good one on our hands. Because I was like, oh, he's so interesting and he's so different from every other Star Wars character I've seen before, because Star Wars is so much about big good and big evil and not as much, especially in a movie format, about the people in between. Those people come in all of the other forms of media that we get in Star Wars, TV, comics, books, manga, etc., but not as much in the movies as our hero or as our protagonist. And this one, we got it right off the bat. And I was like, ooh, he's interesting. I find him interesting. Let's go. And I don't even know how that would settle, like how the movie would settle with me if we didn't have that moment of going, ooh, he's interesting. I imagine it would have come eventually, like with I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old, if that scene was still there. But that's so much later in the movie to start caring about that character.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. And I think the scene really just gets you prepped for a movie where you're going to meet people from all walks of life, whether it's Jin or Chirrut or Baze or Bodhi, right? These are all people with complex histories, but they have made mistakes. They're trying to grow beyond those mistakes. And then here you have Cassian opening the film being like, that's the guy I'm going to root for. Oh, he just killed his best friend. How do I feel about that? How does that make me feel about how I feel about that? And then, fast forward to Andor, there is not a very... There are so few characters in Andor where it's just like everything they do is good, right? Like we know Luthen does bad shit. We know Mothma does some bad shit too. Like everybody's doing bad shit around every corner, but they're doing it in the name of the rebellion. And it kind of goes to show you like the rebellion wasn't only won by the people who only did good things. It was also won by people who sometimes had to make hard choices and do bad things. And that's sort of the price of radicalism and the price of fighting fascism, etc.
Yeah, and I think that this set of characters and explaining Cassian in this way as a complicated hero, as somebody who's had to make these choices, really expands what we can envision a hero to be within Star Wars and complicates that in ways that have been fundamentally important to the last 10 years of Star Wars. And in ways that I know that they were happening at the same time, but Cassian killing Tivik in the beginning of the movie, and also that being a really kind of complicated moment, opens the door for Luke Skywalker in his old age to be complicated in The Last Jedi, and allows Maul to continue to be complicated and interesting. He's as an anti-hero sort of a person. It allows these characters to have these incredible complexities that we all have the capacity for in our lives, and brings Star Wars down to earth much, much more, as opposed to it just being this archetypal Joseph Campbell sort of project. And we love these stories. We love the good versus evil and the light versus dark. But Star Wars, I've always wanted it to be more, especially also watching Star Trek here and there growing up and seeing the complexities of human nature there. And I love that Rogue One made that feel real in a way when some of the politics and relationships, I guess, of the prequel era, especially when we have some of the political, the elites versus the Jedi versus the regular people, those sort of thing, all these different factions, where I love those movies. I'm not here to rag on them. I really do love them. But those still feel elevated or unnatural in a way that Andor and Cassian and his role in Rogue One don't. And I think that's just very, very interesting.
Yeah. I think we really need to study at some point, the impact of Rogue One and the ordinary people making a difference. Because, yeah, like you said, it was all archetypal before then. And I feel like this is really the first movie to underscore, there's so many sacrifices that were made by people who never get recognized ever and will never almost get recognized. And I want to actually pull from the Arda book here. As you were talking, it made me think of this quote. So this is from Phil's intro. He says, quote, "Nevertheless, as both Rogue One and its prequel Andor make abundantly clear, making a difference is not the exclusive domain of world leaders, warrior monks, or superpower wizards of high-born lineage. Collective action by ordinary people, whether they hail from the jungles of Kenari, the streets of Ferrix, the Tuileries of Gorman, or the estates of Chandrila, can turn the tide and topple even the most formidable despots with entire armies at their command." And then Diego Luna adds a quote here that says, "Revolutions, political movements, social movements, big changes in this world. Film has tried many times to simplify it as if there can only be one person that brings change. I think the beauty of all Star Wars, and in particular of this phase of Star Wars, is that it reminds you that is not true. That is impossible, in fact. Changes don't happen unless they matter to many." And I think that kind of encapsulates changes mattering to many. Changes matter to many through the duration of the Rogue One movie. Change matters to Jyn by the end, and to Baze, and to Chirrut, and to Bodhi. It matters to all of them by the end. It doesn't initially, right? But that they all kind of get radicalized very quickly. And it's because of Cassian's steadfastness and his commitment to make hard choices. And that's, I think, something that they respect and are willing to trust their lives with him. And that first scene makes us believe that he's willing to do anything for the cause, even go to Scarif if it means his life, So, God, what an incredible movie. I love Rogue One.
I do too. And I recently had the opportunity to watch it and was reminded of, how much that movie changed my perception of Star Wars, how the experience of watching that movie and having watched the last 2 episodes of Andor right into Rogue One, the full circleness of the last, about 10 years of our lives as Star Wars fans with this story. So with that and thinking about the last 10 years, this show has been on the minds of creatives at Lucasfilm for almost just as long as Rogue One has been. And there was an Andor Bible before Tony Gilroy. And hearing about this was so interesting because it was created by Jared Bush. And okay, Jared Bush, sure. Creative guy. Oh, what did he also work on? Encanto. Zootopia, writer director of Encanto, Zootopia. What? These are not the same thing. These are not the same thing. Not that creatives can't do many things, because we can, and we love them for that. And I love to see the various projects that people work on. But this isn't, knowing what we got from Andor, that's not who I'd imagine writing that original pitch for it.
Isn't that crazy? If it weren't for furries, we never would have gotten Zootopia. We never would have gotten Zootopia. And if we never got Zootopia, we may never have gotten the Andor Bible. And if we never got the Andor Bible, we would have never got Andor. So thank you, furries. Thank you for people who love to the
Thank you to the furries.
Thank you, people who went out and showed up for the Zootopia movie. The Andor Bible is so interesting because it's sort of what the show was originally going to be. And here is the log line. The fledgling rebellion experiences a crippling setback when an Imperial mole hidden within its ranks decimated a series of rebel bases. Cassian Andor, a young intelligence operative, is one of the few who survive, only to be falsely accused of being the mole himself. Out in the cold, Cassian discovers the only way to clear his name and find the mole is to infiltrate an Imperial planet, which holds the key to uncovering the mole's identity. And this was from the Andor Bible, August 3rd, 2018.
What were you doing on August 3rd, 2018, when this was being written?
I was probably working. It's probably just a wee lad getting ready for corporate. Yeah, I'm just like, I love getting paid. I'm living at home. I'm raking in those paychecks. I think I'm still deferred on my student loans. Maybe not. Who knows? I'm living the high life.
Yeah. I think I was, earlier in the summer, we went to Rome with my choir, and I think I was getting ready to move back into college. No. And by move back into college, I was going to DC for the fall. Oh, I did a semester in DC. I was going to DC. I was going to the Kennedy Center.
Oh, nice.
Wow, that was an interesting time in my life. Wow. But at the same time, imagine Jared Bush sitting at a table writing this down. Imagine how different we would be if this was the Andor we got.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk. What really stands out to you? Difference between like this Andor Bible and what we got. Like, what is the thing that you read this and was like, oh, that's
I really think that, when we think about this pitch, it's not bad. Like, it's interesting. I would probably watch it and be happy watching it. I think that it's interesting that there's like the tone of it was potentially like a buddy cop show with K2SO. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I could still work and I'd still probably be into that. The sort of, who doesn't love a good Star Wars joke? I do. I love a good gag, a good goof, a good laugh. But I also enjoy like the political thriller, the really intense stories, these really important real world things. But I think what I thought reading this is it feels very Star Wars in the sense that we love a secret identity that we are then going to uncover, and then it's going to be sort of a crazy revelation. We've done that a few times in Star Wars, just a couple notable ones, including, of course, first and foremost, I'm the spy. And also, Snoke was something that I created, and there's 80 clones of him. And I'm not even thinking about Luke, I'm your father. Sort of. I'm not even thinking about that's not even top 3. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Of course. You're not even laughing at my joke, Brad.
I'm just, you invoked the Snoke pickle jar, and I just am thinking of Snoke pickles once again.
Sorry. I was like, let me bring up all the Tross identities. But no, there is one really iconic one about a secret identity that is revealed and then is, kind of a big deal for our main character, if you will.
I feel like invoking Tross on the Andor episode is like stepping on a mirror, like a mirror breaking, or like walking under a ladder, or like seeing a black cat,
Listen.
It's up there.
Even if it's not for us, it's not other people enjoy.
Sure.
And who doesn't love I'm the Spy with all good seriousness? That's a great, hilarious, iconic moment.
It has its moments. I just need Kylo Ren to lose. It's a great one. Okay. Anyway, back to Andor.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. It kind of puts him out on his own, which I think is a good thread pull from Rogue One. Like he says, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. That establishes him as somebody who maybe has family in the rebellion or otherwise has been active with rebels his whole life. But also maybe as an intelligence officer, he's in a sort of certain different faction. Maybe we think Fulcrum, you know, we think about these people that are maybe on the fringes of what we believe to be right and wrong within the faction that they're in. So like you know, we think about Lonnie, like he's doing terrible things in the name of the Empire for the rebellion so that they have the information that they need. So yeah, I think this spot is interesting, but I'm also not upset that we didn't get it at the end of the day, considering how much we love actual Andor.
Yeah, like to me when I read this, I was like, that sounds like a really good side plot of the Andor show that we got. You know, because you have that year, you know, season 2 set up with the years, every 3 episodes, and it's like, oh, I could see this being like the year in between the 3rd and 4th arc, where like he's kind of getting himself in there on the rebellion. He has a little skirmish. They kick him out for a minute. He's got to prove his worth back in. That feels like a good arc. That'd be like a really interesting arc. But to me, as like a series, and this is no offense to the Andor Bible, because again, it is kind of what started it all here. This feels just like more Star Wars, which isn't always a bad thing, right? When I think of like what would this have like really elevated for the character aside from just being more of Cassian Andor? I can't really think of it other than just being on the surface level, just like a good spy thriller show, which would have been probably very entertaining. The Andor that we got becomes more of a show about how do you become radicalized, and also like how do you become radicalized alongside your communities. And it became this like much bigger idea that is speaking to us in a very particular moment in time. It's really interesting to see kind of like where the inception started and then where we got to. And that kind of fits into like Tony coming on board and even some of his initial impressions of the Andor Bible and like how he wanted to spin the series and why it took him so long to get involved.
Yeah, I also think like it's not surprising to me that he kind of read that pitch and was like, okay, sure, but nah. You know, considering that we know that, you know, Cassian was the character that was most changed through his reshoots, and also that Rings of Kefri and that whole sequence was added, you know, in the reshoots, that already says so much to me about who he thinks Cassian is within the world and the galaxy. And yeah, say more about this timeline of getting Tony involved.
So we know Kathleen obviously had a very good relationship with Tony coming off Rogue One. He came in there, he cleaned it up. It was a very highly critically acclaimed movie for Star Wars at the time. And Tony just basically says flat out, quote, I wasn't interested in that. But beyond anything else, there was no economic model that could actually deliver, and then brackets, a long form story like Andor, because there's no way to do it cheaply. And so here you have Tony just kind of saying like, listen, this is like cool and all, but like if I were to do this, the scope is much bigger and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And boy, oh boy, did he live up to that, because they spent $750 million on the show. I will say it. Well, I've said it once. I'll say it again. Andor's never happening. It's just unless there's like mass changes in the industry, we're never getting Andor again or anything like Andor ever again. It's just simply a relic, the last vestige of old Hollywood before the AI slop takes over. It's just, I will be clutching it forever.
Yeah, I guess it is like really on the. It's interesting because it kind of straddles two different sets of befores and afters as a show. The first is the before and after of the streaming culture, right? In like November of 2017, Bob Iger announces that there are going to be multiple live action series on this new unnamed platform, which turns out to be Disney Plus, with, you know, streaming getting really big in the late 2010s. Disney wants to jump in and do that. And boy, has everything changed since then, because now if it's not the most viral hit in the world on day one and maintains that virality for weeks and weeks and weeks, it's not getting a second season. It's not worth investing in to try and build an audience over time. These companies, whether it be Disney, Netflix, whoever, are looking for instant hits. And it turns out like the model that they've created is not necessarily conducive to that. And the way that, you know, our media landscape has fractured doesn't lend itself to that. What happened with Game of Thrones, if you were on Twitter and in those years, can't really happen again in the same exact way. And so that's one of the befores and afters. And the other is like the AI time, right? Because Chat GPT was, I think, released to the public in November-ish 2022 or 23.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, within the past 2 or 3 years. Oh man. Time is really, who knows. But even then, the image generation models were not that good a couple years ago at all. And now they can be really very good, which is so frightening. And so this show really is a relic of time before times in so many ways, including, you know, I think the idea and the amount of money that was poured into it is very much of a pre-COVID thing, even though it all was, you know, made and finalized after that time.
Yeah, it's hard to ever think of like going back and as more and more companies, and I even saw like on the recent Disney earnings call, I think Damaro had mentioned that, you know, ILM and Pixar might be one of the first pioneers of using more AI as a part of their process. So like we're really going into uncharted territories here, and it's getting a little scary. You know, when you just look at some of these, again, shows, and my opinion is we've done it for 100 years of cinema without it, and I don't think we need it now because we've created some of the greatest things of all time. And I think Andor, again, is just going to stand the test of time as just this like pure, perfect piece of art that speaks to us on all sorts of levels. And I'm really glad that Tony got the vision that he wanted, because and the fact that he even was able to join the show, right? Like Kathy really wanted him. She chased him down year after year, right? So like we're talking Andor Bible 2018, right? They're kicking off the art department on what they call White Snake. And this is kind of after, this is like the code name for the series. And it's based on Jared Bush's outline, which we neglected to mention 2 different titles of that outline: Star Wars Alliance and Star Wars Andor 5.
Yeah, the Andor 5 is interesting.
You were thinking like maybe 5 years, like the 5 years leading up to Rogue One.
5 years of Andor's life, Andor 5 as in like Rogue One, you know, as in like a squadron, as in a team, as in Halo Reach, you know? Sorry, I had to bring her up. I've got an Xbox now. No, but you know, as in like maybe there were 5. It was going to be like a group show again with a main cast of characters that stick through us over the show, maybe. Yeah, but I think those titles are really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so we're in 2018. Kathy gives Tony an update on some of the drafts that I believe Bush is still working on, and he sends back what he calls basically an insane pitch for what the series could be, and that's what becomes the bones of Andor. And it's kind of interesting when you match up the timeline and the details of the art of book against an interview that he gave in Deadline. I believe it was back in 2023, where he was talking about how he gave like a manifesto critique of other versions a year earlier of the show that he had seen. So I'm assuming in that interview he was talking about Jared Bush's outline. And then eventually like Kathy comes back a year later, 2019, and says like, we want you to do your insane pitch. And the way that Tony puts it in this Deadline interview was Kathy basically coming to him and saying, you know, that crazy idea that you gave us, that you talked about what you would want to do, and it seems so insane that we would actually like to try that, and we would like to spend money to do that. And I'm like, I love that. They're like, Tony, keys to the kingdom. Here you go. Spend the check.
And listen. If we're talking about Star Wars movie budgets, they're high. You could even say they're very high. Let's K2SO. But if we break down $750 million, just that's a big number. It's a big number. More money than I'll ever see, that's to be sure. But if we break that down, and if we consider like, okay, well, season 2 is, 4 full-length movies in its arcs, leading up to Rogue One. Let's take the same for season 1. 4 more movies. 8 movies. Star Wars, right? That's only like less than $100 million a movie, which is like a cheap movie.
Yeah.
Think about it. I think that this was a great investment. Kathy should do it again. Kathy's not even there anymore. She should just find a new project and do it again. Dave and Linwin can do it again for Star Wars. Think The Acolyte if they want to revive it. I'm just saying.
I mean, the Mandalorian and Grogu budget was allegedly around $166 million.
See?
When you put it that way, I love that. That's like the I don't want to say like girl math, but that's the Andor math. That's Andor math.
It's kind
It's Andor
kind
math.
of girl math. Andor math. Gender inclusive Andor math.
You and I have a running joke dating back to Anaheim Celebration where we saw an Andor pin at Disneyland and we went, it's an Andor pin. And then all the time we just go, it's an Andor, and then insert noun. So now it's
in a very
Andor
particular tone of voice. It goes, it's an Andor. That's how it goes. And I want you to know that the Andor pin is on a pin board in my room. And every time I see it, which is every day because I stare at it, I go, it's an Andor pin in my head all the time. I've never forgotten.
That's got to be worth a lot of money, that pin. That was one of the only Andor pins they've ever made. And we own it.
Watch me Google it, and it's like worth less money than what we paid for it.
Probably.
But not to me. Priceless in my heart. Because that was like the first piece of merch that we saw. It was so cool.
Well, several years before you and I bought the Andor pin at Disneyland, Tony Gilroy was having a Manhattan writer's room retreat in November of 2019. So he brought along Dan Gilroy, his brother, Beau Willimon,
the icon, the legend,
production designer Luke Hull, producer Sane Wallenberg, who we've had the honor to speak to on a roundtable interview during the first season, along with Nicholas and Beau. We talked to Beau as well. Oh my God.
Yeah, we did.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. That was wild.
I remember.
Basically, once Tony's on board, they have this writer's retreat. He brings in like pre-done 28 page outline of Andor. And they just go to town. They just go to town on like, what is the show? What are the journeys that these characters go on? And they just get to work. And I wish I could have been in that room. I would have loved it.
Yeah, me too. Nothing more to say, actually. I just like to be a fly on the wall in all of these like really creative rooms where they're doing really cool things and creating the things that we know and love very much.
There are 3 writers' rooms, arguably in the last 10 years of Star Wars, that mean the most to you and I. It is this writer's room in Manhattan. It is the writer's room at Skywalker Ranch for the High Republic.
Oh, yes.
I think in 2018 or 2017.
Yeah.
And then there is the Star Wars Resistance writer's room that was hosted by Dave Filoni, also at Skywalker Ranch.
I'm so glad we're on the same page about this. It's true.
Really, the holy trinity, the real Star Wars trio is those 3 writers' rooms.
That's right. And then if I could just like be a fly on the wall in any room that Rian Johnson is writing The Last Jedi in. I mean, he did that himself, but I'd like to be there.
Every room that he is currently in is a writer's room for Rian Johnson because it is his room at that point in time. So respect.
Exactly.
Respect,
I just think it's so amazing that like he brought 128 pages worth of story and thoughts, and like this is what I want it to be. And of course, this team that he assembled in this first big creative session is such an iconic team to the show, and who has contributed, each of them, so much to what the show is. And I think we hype up Tony a lot, and deserved, honestly. But I think we also should be hyping up every single other member of this creative team in the room, and including all of like the heads of department that were assembled in April of 2020. What a time to assemble a team to put together a show. I don't think I need to mention what was going on at that time, although we will definitely get into it.
The best time to assemble a team is when you're supposed to be socially distancing. I love that.
You know, that's kind of when you roped me into doing this podcast with you on the regular basis. But we were already social distanced.
I know. It was really that Shadowfall episode later in the summer of 2020 that really did you in.
Yeah.
Tony,
well, chapter 18. Anyway,
really pivotal. Tony calls his who's who of people that were involved with the show, his kind of co-conspirators, right? Like the people that all the talented humans that they could afford who are going to be essential to building this show. And I want to say up front too, like Stephen Schiff was originally supposed to be the showrunner alongside Sanne Wallenberg. Stephen Schiff went on just to write episode 7 of season 1, Announcement, which is one of your favorites.
That's right.
So he was still involved with the show, but Tony's the showrunner, Sanne is the producer. Really, I think a lot of the heads of department comes down to Luke Hull getting pulled into the show, because Luke Hull worked with Sanne on Chernobyl on HBO. And so he comes in and then he starts to pull in people that he's connected to. So he's got Rebecca Alloway, who's a set decorator, graphic designer Dominic Sicking, lead graphic designer Barry Baz Gingle, who ends up becoming the model for Anto Krieger, which is very funny.
That's right.
And then you also are pulling in costume designer Michael Wilkinson. You got creature and droid FX creative Neil Scanlon, who no stranger to Star Wars, the Scanlon Creature Shop. We love to see it involved across Skeleton Crew and the sequels and you name it. Prop master Martin Doust, and then ILM's Mohin Leo and TJ Falls. So just to name a couple of people who I think are also featured prominently in this book. And I will say that's one of my favorite things about the Art of book is we're not just hearing from the main names. We're hearing from, again, all the people who poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this series. And they're providing notes in the margins. They're providing context behind the creative process. And it's really incredible just to see, like, again, this book be a celebration of the show. It's not a celebration of one person. It's a celebration of all the hundreds of people who developed it. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, and there's like a whole 2-page spread of like all the names that are mentioned in the book. And there are so many artists and creatives who are mentioned throughout the book. And I just think it's a testament to the power of people and the power of human creativity and art. And also it gives a voice to a lot of people whose work is only ever seen behind the scenes outside of, these sorts of reference books. And I'm so appreciative of that in these books because there are so many people who work on these projects. The credits of any show or movie is a mile long, and rightfully so, right? Because human creativity and putting together a project of this scale requires so many minds and so many hands to make it happen. And yeah, I just loved the variety of artists and art we get to see in the book and whose voices we get to hear from.
Before we move on to the next piece of our conversation, which is around the challenges of making this show, I do also want to highlight this quote from Luke Hull, because this is often something we heard a lot when Andor was being created, even from Tony himself, of like, I'm not coming into this like Star Wars first. I am not like the Star Wars guy. I'm just here to take these big ideas I have and tell them through Star Wars. That's like the way he approached Andor. And I think there's some lessons to be learned there, but not only does the show work because of all these great creative people we just listed off, but Luke Hull's philosophy as he's pulling this team together, he said, quote, "I was very careful about the team I surrounded myself with. For me, it was about having a really interesting balance of people who were super fans or had worked on the films and people who had never done it before, whom I just worked with before, and their work is interesting and clever." Tony had put together people where Star Wars didn't necessarily come first. You don't realize how much it makes people behave slightly strangely as well. It brings baggage. You have to respect Star Wars for sure. You have to understand it, but I also think it's a shame if you don't try and do something bold with it. I'm not saying that we even achieved that. I just think we did something that felt different. And that was like an immediate write down for me as I was reading this book, because again, it's just, I think that is the crux of why the show works. It's just people who are passionate about what they do. Star Wars isn't their primary MO. It's just about kicking ass behind the scenes and making cool shit. And I love that. And again, like he hits that balance. It's balance between super fans, balance between people who have never seen Star Wars and couldn't care less about it. They're just like, I'm here to do my job and do it super well. And that's fine.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to have people from all the perspectives because, you and I, as Star Wars fans, like, sometimes I think we can be a little precious about it. It's like, ooh, that is a little sacred in some sort of way. Whereas somebody who doesn't know Star Wars as well or spend as much time thinking about Star Wars goes, okay, yeah, but who cares? It's just a thing. And I think that having that balance of perspectives is like can be so helpful. Otherwise you get too wrapped up in what it means to you, that you can't kind of take a step back and understand what it means for the story.
Yeah. And I think the greatest example of Luke's quote in practice is Ferrix, because there's a point in the book where they talked about bricks specifically and how Luke Cole was saying there had been concept artists who had done Star Wars before and were like, you can't use brick. We've tried and we've failed. And Tony had walked by the London Globe Theater and was like really inspired by the brick on that. And Luke Cole, he gives this quote that's just like, you can make any shape you want as long as it feels Star Wars-esque and it's coherent and you believe it's a real town, it works. And so it's like without that sort of like ingenuity and that thought that doesn't necessarily box you into what Star Wars has to be, we get Ferrix because of that. We get Ferrix, this very industrial town with the gloves on the wall. And Ferrix, I think, is just now a fan favorite location for everybody. Like, tell me one person who hates Ferrix, except the Empire, except Cyril Card.
You can't name them; they don't count. And also, Ferrix was so built out that it basically could be Batuu in terms of places you could actually walk through.
Yeah, they should have really waited on Galaxy's Edge and built Ferrix instead. I love Batuu, but or we could have both. Disney. May I interest you in a pitch?
I think the pitch is a whole Star Wars land with various Star Wars planets, and then I can bop between Camino and Utapau all the time. Thank you. And Kashyyyk.
Does that one concept art from 15, 20 years ago where somebody did Star Wars land and the Death Star is in the middle? Does that always haunt you? Because it haunts me. Because I was always oh yeah, that's the dream, baby. That's it. I'll live there. And
then we can do expansion Andor lands. That's right.
Yeah. I think, in hindsight, that might have been the move. I love Batuu, but that might have been the move, folks. All right. Not to rewind the clocks here to a time in our lives that was very turbulent, but let's talk about the challenges of the show. And first and foremost is COVID. You mentioned the heads of department assembling April of 2020. And we're really starting to kick off pre-production right alongside the pandemic. COVID-19 hits March. Things get shut down. Tony's cooped up in his Manhattan apartment. He's not in the UK where a lot of the production is going to occur. Most of it, pretty much all of it. And he's just cranking away with the pen. He's just going at the scripts and going at the outline of the show and what it needs to be. Because I believe he wrote the first 3 episodes as well, right? And Toby Haynes was hired and he would go on to direct that first arc. And I believe it's because Tony wasn't traveling to the UK, because I think we learned in this book Tony was going to direct, but then Toby was hired instead.
Yeah, because he couldn't get out to the UK, travel restrictions. He just wasn't going to do it. And so they're like, okay, we need to hire someone. We need to change our plan a little bit. And that worked out because then we got many great directors working on this project as well. Tony was in Manhattan kind of zooming in or FaceTiming in or Skyping in. Was Skyping not dead yet? Who knows? But they were shooting at Pinewood in London.
Looking back, I think the craziest thing about this, though, is I believe based on the book, it sounds like they started principal photography around the end of 2020, into 2021, because 9 weeks they were doing stuff by February, right? So kind of backtrack from there. But that's man, what a time we were living in with Hollywood just completely shut down. And I'm even shocked that this was going on that early in the pandemic. Although I guess we got the vaccines around when, April of 2021.
I do not remember.
Gosh, what a weird time we were living in. But I think one of the takeaways here, and I'd love to get your thought too, is Rebecca Alloway had actually talked about despite how awful and tragic the pandemic was, she said, quote, "It was a gift for us to get ahead. The pandemic really allowed me to do a proper deep dive and analyze it like I would a piece of history if I was doing a historical film, talking about the set decoration," right? So it's like, here we are, all these creatives are not really constrained by the quickened pace of TV production because everything is paused. So they're able to actually like take the time and really invest themselves in this world. And maybe in another reality, when they don't have as much time afforded to them, maybe their vision isn't fully seen to fruition. Maybe they like do have to cut some corners, right? But it's kind of interesting to frame the pandemic in that way for this show.
Yeah, but it also makes a certain amount of sense. Things were so difficult in so many ways. I think emotionally, socially, of course, medically for so many. I don't know anyone who wasn't in some way affected by COVID, right? But at the same time, talking with you on this podcast and talking about resistance was like a huge point of joy, and trying to do something productive and find some happiness in a difficult time. I would do my puzzles and read my books. It's kind of like, what could we do in that moment to either be creative or do something that would be happy or feel productive in a time that felt so uncertain and terrible in so many ways. So I'm not surprised that it ended up being a real boost to their ability to be creative, because if we don't have to spend 40 minutes in the car to drive to work, what are we spending that 40 minutes doing? Maybe it's researching a certain type of design, or finding more fabric, or rewriting a scene, So it's such a complicated period of time, but I am glad that it was able to be utilized by members of this creative team in a way that lended to their creativity.
Yeah, and I guess I look at it too in hindsight of like, man, the pandemic could have really been an opportunity for Disney just to say like, you know what, we're not gonna do this. We don't know what the future looks like. Let's just cancel the project, And so like, I think the first obstacle of the show is like, can we get through this? Can we get cameras rolling? Are we going to be prepared to build the sets and get people onto set and go through all the rigorous testing, COVID testing and COVID protocols and masking and all of that, right? Like, productions were hard. Productions were often isolating, I feel like, for a lot of crew members and actors, right? So it's incredible that they still persevered through that. And I believe the pandemic is also partially what caused production to change from 8 to 12 episodes, because they had more time to really build out the story. So yeah, we got more episodes out of it as well because of having that extra time afforded to them.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting because it's the creative thing that many Star Wars creatives talk about. It's like, okay, when we got to know, or we have to change this, the outcome ended up being better or more interesting. And I think one of the interesting things with this, with the 8 to 12 episodes, but then also in April of 2021, when Tony came to Scotland for the Aldani shoot, he was like, hey, I don't know if we can do 5 seasons of this, Diego. And Diego's like, yeah, I don't know me either. Actually, I don't know. Maybe we do too. Maybe we figure that one out, which I think is hilarious. But also understandable. Like, they're not making TV in the same environment that 2000s, 24-hour episode network television was made. And they're not making one movie in the same way that you would make a movie of something far scarier perhaps than either of those two things. But like Aldani, they talk about on page 106, at one point had so many more people because of COVID restrictions and testing. They had to change the landscape for the people of Aldani and reimagine kind of the position that community and that culture was in at the time of the heist, which I thought was interesting. And I do see a version in my mind where the planet has so many more people and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of extras, but there's something so devastating about the people coming to the eye being such a small group of people at this point. I think it speaks to the level of devastation that the Empire causes to local peoples and cultures.
And I think too, there, right? Like, even though they didn't necessarily get their way that they wanted with Aldani, it just again goes to show that like when they're presented with a challenge, they work through it somehow, right? And COVID wasn't going to be the last challenge that they faced. We then had 2 strikes in 2023. We had the WGA strike, which was 148 days from May to September. And then SAG-AFTRA went on strike as well for about 118 days, that ending around November. Which again, those were extremely necessary, worthwhile causes. Those strikes needed to happen to help guarantee, stuff around like AI protections and like, minimums for pay and like streaming pay, those sorts of things, right? So they were negotiating for quite a while, but it definitely set production back on season 2 because they were already well into it. And I think one of the most surprising things that I learned from the Art of book was season 2 started principal photography while season 1 was still airing. First day was November 21st, 2022, and they start with the interior of Cyril's office on Gorman.
Yeah, to put this in perspective, after the last shot of principal photography for season 1 was filmed on October 5th, 2022.
During the season.
Which, like, is not crazy if you're doing a soap opera or a 24 episode show, but it feels crazy for a $750 million Star Wars show, at least to me, as someone who does not make TV for a living.
Yeah, and that was the day that the season 1 episode 5 drops, The Axe Forgets. So that's just to put that in perspective. So just remember, when you woke up that morning and watched The Axe Forgets, they were finishing the final shots of season 1. Incredible.
Yeah. Actually crazy.
I mean, now we wait, what? 2-3 years to even start filming the next season of something? Like, I'm thinking Pluribus. Pluribus ended last year. That thing's probably not filming season 2 until next year.
Yeah, I think the thing is that these days it's like, okay, we're going to wait and see how a show hits before we even decide if we're going to do it again. Whereas before, it's like, okay, we feel really, we as the network or whatever feel really positively about the show. We're going to greenlight a second season. We're going to greenlight a second season anyway in order to continue to build the audience. Or you pitched 3 seasons, and so we're going to do 3 seasons. These sorts of things. I feel like they were always in motion prior to the new era of streaming culture. But now it's like, okay, we did season 1 and now we're done with promotions and we'll just wait for the network to tell us we want another. Okay, we did it. And now we need to do 10 months of prep work and then 20 weeks of shooting. And then we can put out a show, 15 weeks later after we've edited and done special effects and everything. And yeah, the timeline is just so extended. Like, speaking of Silo, for instance, Silo had seasons 1 and 2. Season 2 finished airing, I think, in January of 25. Came back in June or July of 26. I loved that show, and I'm happily watching it again, but I had forgotten absolutely everything about it, including the main character's name. In the meantime, I had to like really think and be like, oh yeah. And yes, I did like a recap, and that was helpful, but I was so excited that it was back, but it was so out of my mind while it was gone. And thankfully they renewed it for both seasons 3 and 4, with 4 being their last. So we know that like a show like that is going to get its resolution. And it was renewed for 2 seasons at a time. So they were able to work on both seasons at the same time. And now we know that the last season will be coming out in summer of 2027. And so that it encourages confidence for me as a viewer who is really invested in the show and is looking forward to seeing how it wraps up, and knows that it is going to wrap up, as opposed to going, okay, well, I watched 1 season of that. Maybe they're going to renew it. Why would you invest in something like that?
I think the most egregious example of this, by the way, and now I feel like the slowness of TV is bleeding into movies, is the Batman. I just want to shout that out real quick, right? Like, Batman Part 1, March 2022. Batman Part 2 is not coming out till February 2028. 6 years. It's for a second Batman movie. I'm dying on the inside.
Had they decided that they wanted a Batman 2 before Batman came out, or were they waiting to see on that one again?
Oh, I feel like I remember the Batman 2 getting greenlit like pretty soon after the Batman Part 1. Like people being like, yeah, we're doing Part 2.
Okay, so it's been more of a
Matt Reeves
trying to figure it out.
Taking forever to write. Yeah.
Taking forever to write. Wow, you're really gonna hit him. No, I mean, Matt Reeves kind of working through that script and trying to figure it out and taking time to do that, as opposed to having it ready to go essentially by the time the movie came out. That definitely like would make a difference probably in the timing, and also of course the iconic Robert Pattinson's schedule, of which he's been fairly busy these past few years.
100%. But I love your point though, just about the industry, and again, like the more risk averse that Hollywood is, the longer these things are going to take. And I wish we lived in a time where we were confident in our products.
The longer they take, and maybe the less confident that us as fans, as viewers, have in the projects, right? Because there have been so many people I know who I've recommended a show to that maybe only has one season. Oh, well, is there going to be a second season? Oh, I don't know. Oh, well, maybe then I won't watch it until there's a second season. Or I don't know if I want to spend my time doing that, because people have been burned so many times, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
And now you're making, sorry, one last little rant here, but you're making me think of like there was a recent Ted Sarandos quote, who is the Netflix CEO, where somebody asked him about like shows getting canceled. He's like, well, you gotta justify a large enough audience. Like, you just hit the nail on the head. It's a negative feedback loop here, where it's like, take forever, we drop interest. That's why the audience isn't there, because we stop caring. Like, very simple, right? Like, there's a reason cable TV was successful. Like, why Lost was one of the biggest shows of all time is because season ends May, new season starts September. Like, you have the summer off and you're back on the island with our survivors,
that
right?
Was
like, what
crazy.
are we doing? You know,
that was
like
crazy.
Insane. Yeah, I miss it. I miss how TV used to be. Maybe we'll get there one day, but eventually we'll just have 2 episode seasons and then I'll just cry. Can't wait for my slop. Okay. Any other thoughts on the challenges of Andor and the environment around Andor, aside from just like, wow, the show is a miracle. I can't believe that happened despite all the shit that happened.
I don't know. I feel like those are all my main thoughts. It is sort of a miracle that it happened. I'm so grateful that it happened and that they persevered through so many of these challenges. Yeah. And also I was reading this book and they were talking about, oh yeah, we were doing this. And then we went to Star Wars Celebration 2022 and we revealed the trailer. And then because I didn't go to Star Wars Celebration 23, it hardly exists in my mind. It doesn't exist. But then they were like, yeah. And then we were working on it. And then we stopped working on it for a second to go to Star Wars Celebration 2023 in London and present a panel there and show some exclusive footage from season 2. And I went, what? That happened? It did. It did. So it's interesting to think about how the creative timeline intersected with our fan timeline and how much we were anticipating the show and the second season. And then also, what they were working on behind the scenes while we were getting little bits and pieces here and there.
Totally. That's a great point. Yeah, it's wild. You never know what they're doing behind the scenes when we're at those conventions.
What are they doing right now?
Probably, aside from finishing up post-production on Ahsoka, which should allegedly have a trailer at D23 this weekend.
Soon, maybe.
Excited to see that trailer. I'm down.
And then Starfighter.
Oh, yeah, Starfighter. Listen. I heard the Netflix CEO on the town, or the IMAX CEO talking about Starfighter, because you sent me the
he literally just
snippet.
said, oh, I went to the set of Starfighter. It's like a throwback to the Harrison Ford movies or something of that sort. And it felt like a kind of, I think it was sort of like a throwaway comment from him, but it didn't feel like a throwaway comment to me because I'm crazy. And I thought that was really interesting. And then Matt Bellany on the town was like, well, they're really hoping for a hit. You're really hoping for a hit because obviously we're going to put the Star Wars movie in the IMAX. And he wants money. The IMAX CEO wants money for IMAX, of course. But he goes, and Matt Bellany's like, yeah, and Mandalorian and Grogu kind of tanked for the company. And he goes, the CEO goes, take it to the bank. I think it's going to be good. So I mean, I don't know this man. I don't know whether we should be trusting him or not, but he says he's been to the set and he says it's Harrison Ford like. So who knows?
We're getting close here, Sarah, where the Starfighter hype for us starts. We're getting close. Jan 1, we're going in Starfighter mode. More to come, but I'm excited.
We got a lot before then, but once Jan 1 hits, it's a totally different game in like 18 different ways. This is also going to be the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. There's so much going on.
I can't wait to not sleep next year. Speaking of not sleeping and really just being a total maniac about Star Wars, let's talk about one of the main ingredients of Andor, which was Mania. And I think this is one of my favorite takeaways from the Art of book, which was included in the foreword by Tony, where he says, Mania was our secret weapon. Mania plus time and resources. Targeted mania, hive-minded mania with a deadline that required focused decisions. And then he later goes on and says the workflow was constant. When pressed for time, we double down. When forced to compromise, we always manage to find a more interesting way to go. It sounds utopian, but it's true. Andor was a maximal creative experience shared by a ridiculous number of motivated co-conspirators. We put every bit of ourselves into the work and every farthing on the screen and had a blast doing it. Maximal creative experience. He was technically creative maxing. They didn't even know it. They didn't even know there was a word for it.
Yeah, he was doing creative maxing before creative maxing was even a thing.
Yeah. You and I had the chance to interview Tony Gilroy at Lucasfilm. Not a humble brag. We just still can't believe that happened and why it happened and how we were there. But he talked about in that interview, with that roundtable interview, letting the freak flag fly. It's a hard string of words to say. And this sort of fits into the Mania idea of just like being passionate and just not being afraid to explore different avenues and different ways of doing things and really pushing the boundaries of like what we conventionally think of when we make these projects. And that's really what resonated with me on this quote about Mania.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about is like for every image, and Tony says this too, like for every image that we see in this book, he says that there are take a moment to consider how many sketches, iterations, and conversations were invested in every single one. This is like creative maxing to its core. How many conversations, how much time was spent considering every single image in this book in order to, and probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more to create the thing that we have now.
Yeah, I love that quote too, because, going back to your earlier comments around AI, and we've seen more artists who are shifting some of their processes to AI, generative AI, when they're saying, oh, well, what you see on screen isn't AI, but we use AI in the process. We use AI to take our ideas and put them on paper. And I'm just like, look at this book. Look how beautiful this book is. Look how the countless number of hours and iterations of things that these creatives had to go through to land on the right idea. And we've had concept artists for decades. We've had storyboard artists for decades. We don't need AI. We don't need to outsource this creative process to AI. We can do it on our own. We've been doing it on our own forever. And I really think like the joy is in the discovery. The joy is in the friction of the creative process of writer's block, of bashing your head against the wall. I think of George Lucas on the whiteboard, the meme where he's just like putting his head on the thing, right? Like,
yeah,
that's it. That's art. That's creating art. It sucks sometimes, but when you get that moment of eureka, it's beautiful and you create something great from it, And so, yeah, this book is really just a testament to human creation. And why AI could never create Gorman. It just could never.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of, I think, human art that I think has been cannibalized by AI and a particular kind of art, I would love to talk a little bit about the graphic design and fonts and logos in Andor, because immediately, one of the things I globbed onto and was looking for throughout this whole book was the work of head graphic designer Barry Baz Gingle and the assistant graphic designer, Lauren Dix, who have so many quotes and art that is featured in here, including literally the first page. Like, you look at those end papers, first page on the end papers is the Andor logo. And the first thing we learn is like the Andor logo was not even created initially to be the Andor logo. And it was designed within the first week, his first week on the job. They were thinking of having like this is a paraphrase quote, thinking of having an anti-imperial pro-rebel graffiti painted on the brick walls of Ferrix. And he wanted to create a proto-rebel symbol, a pre-evolution of the symbol that we know, but sharper and more dangerous looking. He wanted to be simple, and I found it difficult to ignore the bird notion that was set up in, Star Wars Rebels, Savine's Phoenix. And the symbol feels more like a weapon than that version, I guess, of the sort of rebel adjacent logos. But how cool is it that this was just created to become maybe something that was seen in the background, and it ended up being the whole, shaping the whole visual language, at least in the promotional materials of the show. And then also, we get like a bunch of cool languages, include the Dixie and Gorman language, which was class-based. There was high Gore and low Gore. And so we see the typography of that. And it's called Gorel. I think that was Lauren Dix's Gorman language. And then we have the Compnor logo. We have Terabesh, which is kind of Arabesh, but a different font of Arabesh, which I thought was so cool. It was easier to be seen. It was oversized and bulky. It was a little bit more easy to be seen. I think it's on Mina Rao. And I thought that was really cool. And then we also have the Baziz language on Ferrix.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I picked that up too.
Yeah. Didn't that come from Ralph McQuarrie? Or some of the elements of that come from Ralph McQuarrie?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that this was one of the coolest things that I learned throughout this book, because the work of graphic design is so effortful, and it's made to feel effortless when our eyes look at it. When your favorite major corporate brand changes logos, and you're like, wait a second, why does it look like that? And the comfort that the sort of ease of the graphic design of whatever was before felt. But yeah, I feel like graphic design plays such a role in every element of our lives. Like, I'm looking at, 8 different logos in front of me of various brands of things that I own. And it also, of course, has to play a huge role, the visual language and style, the typography of what we see in Star Wars.
Yeah. And I think it just goes to show too, like, every detail in Star Wars has intentionality to it. And I think that's what makes Star Wars so wonderful. And why, like, the rise of like Gen AI in our creative processes worries me the most, because like I love those little background details. Like, even if it's a simple Ferrix font, like that's on a poster in the town, right? Like, I want that to be created by a human. Those are some of my favorite parts of Star Wars. It's just, again, like the background assets that you see for like half a second, but like somebody probably spent 2 hours on it. It's like, it's wild.
Here's how I designed a screen that you see on a terminal that an extra is sitting at, that is shown in half a second.
Yeah.
When the camera pans across. Like, I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool.
Such intentionality.
Actually, speaking of Baziz, which you just brought up, one thing I wrote down was from the Time Grappler, which, like, you love the Time Grappler.
Yes, I do.
Had to bring him up. Of course, he's in this book, which is like, I think there's actually a spread of him at one point in the book. So you might have to get that framed somehow, or maybe just get those pages framed. Cause he's your man, but
he's my guy.
Yeah.
If you see me cosplaying the Time Grappler, don't worry about it. She's living her best life. Okay.
You should absolutely do that cosplay for next year.
In case anybody's wondering, it's pages 68 and 69.
Nice. There is a part in the book about the anvil, though, which the Time Grappler uses, and they were talking about how Mike Doust, I believe is his name, the prop designer, or Martin Doust, excuse me, prop master Martin Doust. He had found like a musical anvil. He made it bigger. It was scripted as being made of Beskar. He says, quote, "This is something that's always told the time. The heart of Ferrix was the sound of the anvil ringing out, and we wanted it to look like it's been beaten for 1,000 years." And there is specific Baziz script at the base of the tower in Ferrix, which I just wanted to shout out here because you said Baziz fonts for Ferrix. And it says, "When the first anvil rings, to work we must go. When the second anvil rings, lay down your tools and rest in the knowledge that you have earned it. Should Ferrix be threatened, heed the call of the anvil well." Which, we hear it when Morlana Core invades the town in episode 3. You hear the banging of the anvils and of the metal sheets around town, and there you go. That's why it's at the base of the tower in Baziz script. It's the instruction.
If only we could have read that. The Baziz, when it's just comes across the screen, and then we could have had some incredible foreshadowing for ourselves. We could be like, "Oh, I think they're trying to tell us something about later in the season."
Maybe if it was a Netflix show, it'd be like Cassie and Andor being like, "Hey, wait, doesn't the base of the tower say, doesn't the tower say, bang the anvil, heed the call?"
No, listen. But when things are in Orabesh and then people are like, "Wait a second, it says something, Lena So Hospital or whatever."
Shout out Star Wars Explained for always coming in with the posts usually on those small.
I've got the Arabesh translation for you guys. Thank you so much, friend. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes into, we've been talking about design and the intentionality in a design. You took a lot of notes about the design being real and the manifesto of Tony Gilroy to Luke Hull about the design and what it must look like. And your favorite line. Sorry, I'm going to do it for you.
Read the whole thing, please. Yeah,
okay. The design must crush, must be fresh and forward, highest bar. Take the visual Star Wars as canon and pervert it into something real. That's the goal here. Mad, but real. I'm interested in dynamics always. Loud, quiet, huge, small. When we go big, it's all in, but always with an eye towards making everything more down and molecular and believable than any previous Star Wars aesthetic. Next paragraph, he says, "There's a parallel to the narrative here. Yes, the Andor stories are inevitably going to be writ large. The material pulls you towards a grand adventure, and there's no use or reason to fight it. But the lens and the tone of the situations, the characters' behavior in the dialogue always want to be pushing for the complexity of real." And before we say anything, can we just hear Tony saying this? I can hear him and his kind of very particular style saying or writing all of this. I love it.
The design must crush. I love that. He's so passionate. And I love the manifesto here. And I think specifically perverting the Star Wars canon, the way he describes that. It's not hey, we're not just replicating Star Wars' visual canon. We are perverting it. We are taking it into something that you are unfamiliar with, but will still be grounded, but even be more real, more detailed than anything you've ever seen before. And I will probably speak for most fans and say yes, that is exactly how it felt. Every ounce of the show, something new, something unique, something we really hadn't explored before. It pushed the envelope in each and every way. And it's the reason we're still talking about it a year and a half after the show ended, because it is like glue on our minds, and everything about the show felt real, especially in the time that we were watching it, despite Tony and crew really not having the foresight of all of the events that would occur while they were writing and after they were writing this show, right? The show speaks to the cyclicalness of history. It's that simple. And they weren't afraid to shy away from that gravitational pull that kind of story and material has on a person as we live through it,
Yeah. And I think that there's something, so successful in the tangibility of all of this and in the realness of it all, that it feels like a place that any of us could be walking around, or situations that any of us could be walking around in our own galaxy. But it still feels so distinctly Star Wars. And I think merging these ideas of what is Star Wars and what is real into one elevates what Star Wars, as I've said before, what Star Wars is and can be. And so I appreciate the passion and the attention to detail and the desire to push Star Wars into something new and distinct.
And it just also the mention of dynamics, loud, quiet, huge, small. Like, this is a show that has a lot of quiet moments, has a lot of scenes with just two characters talking about their fundamental beliefs in a system and either how they want to support or break that system, and then proceeds to be followed by some of the greatest set pieces you've ever seen, like people marching down the streets of Ferrix, or the one way out in Arkina 5 prison break, which like that is like a whole new level of Star Wars lexicon. Narkina 5 one way out. It's a reason that it's Celebration Europe. We got all the people running around in their Narkina 5 outfits after the Andor panel going one way out. Like, that's a legacy right there, you know? That's incredible.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, as much as it's played for something of a shock value in that fandom space, or like a in between a shock value and a gag, like, wow, isn't this so cool? This is crazy that everybody's doing this. It's also it's a signal that, like, yeah, it really has stuck with people. The message of what that sacrifice meant, and or what that moment meant, it was liberation for those people, and hopefully a chance at a new day, has meant to fans that they would want to you know, become the character or cosplay it, or, you know, consider it in fan spaces, I think is really exciting.
Yeah. And my ultimate hope too with Andor, as we start to wrap up here too, is like, as we think of it being real and feeling real, there are a lot of people who watch the show and probably had a moment where they're like, I understand things that are going on in my world now because of Andor, you know, and I don't think we should ever make fun of people for, you know, maybe taking a while to have that realization, or only having it because they watched Andor, right? Like, if Andor was the wake up call for people, great, you know. Cassian Andor, the whole show is about Cassian Andor's wake up call. It's about his education, you know. And so I think it's beautiful that we have a Star Wars story that we can pass down from generation to generation to tell something beautiful and tragic all at once, and really teach us something about the world that we're living in, you know, and through a lens that is familiar and is something that we're passionate about and love and want to keep talking about all the time. And then hopefully turn that moment of realization into action in our real world, you know? So God, what a special show.
What a special show. And what a special book to, you know, allow us to dig back into the show and learn more than we knew before, and also bring us to having this conversation about the creation of the show. I will take any and every opportunity to yap about it, you know?
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, do you have any final thoughts on this book? Anything odds and ends wise that we didn't get to, but you want to shout out? And it's okay if you don't, but this is really just the last call for the art of Andor here.
Yeah. It's not a specific thing. I mean, it is a specific thing, but it's not about necessarily the conversation that we've had. What happened to the Mud Troopers from Solo? And why were they not in the Lucasfilm archive? Because on page 242, we learn that they had to remake the Mud Troopers from scratch because they were no longer in the Lucasfilm archive from Solo. Where did they go? I have lingering questions about this, actually.
If it's not in the Lucasfilm archive, it does not exist.
Clearly. And there were moments where they were able to like use Draven's costume from Rogue One in Andor. They obviously had to rebuild one of the Bail Organa costumes for Benjamin Bratt because he has a different build than Jimmy Smits does, but they like rebuilt that costume, and they remade, like Neil Scanlon remade some of his Rogue One era, like Pow and Radis remade those based off of their previous work. But one thing I thought was interesting about the pre-done versus new was on page 153, they talk about how the music in the Ferrix scene was pre-recorded, but basically all of those instruments were kit bashed, and they were just like, okay, just find whatever you can do. whatever you can attach to them, just attach it to them. These, these regular instruments. Every single one of them was playable. And even though the music was pre-recorded, the extras and the ensemble folks played on top of the pre-recording in those scenes. And I thought that was cool as hell, because that was like, okay, incredible Star Wars things are happening here. The kit bashing of real musical instruments, and they're still playable. And then also, okay, yes, we pre-recorded the music in a way that we would traditionally expect from music in a film. That's not Les Miserables from 2012. But also playing over it because everything is still functional. Thought that was really cool. Thank you. That's it. I think that's all I have to say. What about you?
My only odds and ends. Well, first off, those are great. I love, again, the Rick's Road episode's amazing. My only ones were Mina Rao not realizing that was the sequence or scenes that were most impacted by the strike. And I know we learned this during when the season 2 was airing, but they actually built real crops for Mina Rao, and they had to figure out while the strike was ongoing, how do they keep those crops alive? And they had to do some gardening there to make sure that they would last the duration of the strike. And then Genevieve O'Reilly, the dance at the end of episode 3 in season 2, that was filmed after the strike. So they had filmed a lot of stuff before the strikes, and then she just comes back and delivers the performance of a lifetime. What a queen.
Yeah.
What a way to get back into character, is to just be like, mic drop. Here we go. Can't believe she never got nominated for an Emmy. Like, what are we doing as a society? But, Genevieve, you won an Emmy in my heart.
That's right.
So, well, all right, Sarah. Well, thank you for joining me. And I will say we won't have to wait much longer for the next Art of book, The Art of the Mandalorian and Grogu.
Oh, yeah.
Comes out in November 3rd from Phil Stozak. So that's his next book. I believe that's also going to include not only concept art from the movie, but also the Book of Boba Fett, I believe, will be also, there's some sketches from that show.
Cool.
And maybe possibly some season 3 stuff from The Mandalorian, because I don't think they ever did a individual book for that season. So
cool. Well, more Art of ahead. Yeah. And I think what's going to be really exciting about that one too is that, as we both know and enjoyed from that movie, there is so much amazing creature work in that film. So I bet there will be many a creature design to see the evolution of.
Oh my God, the Rod of the Hutt art is going to go nuts.
But maybe also Embo. Some Embo art. And we know, I think, Embo hot.
Say, what are you doing in November? You wanna come back and talk a little bit more about some art? I do love some art.
It's possible.
It might just be a Rod of the Hutt episode, but never say never.
That's right.
I'll be here. Anyway, Sarah's like, I gotta get out of the Rod of the Hutt episode. I can't be a part of it. I actually am busy that week. He's
his own man. He's not like his father. But now you can conclude the episode.
Oh boy, he really is his own man. Did you see at Rebel ScumCon they did the running of the Rod of the Hutts? I'm my own man. They're all shouting, "I'm my own man."
I hope it happens at Celebration. Okay, continue.
Thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, as always. And if you want to hear more from us, follow us on our socials. Wherever you listen to the podcast, make sure you're subscribed. We got so much more to talk about in the next couple of months here. We got, again, Edge of the Abyss coming out soon. We got Star Pilots from Chris Kempshaw later in the year. We got Rogue One 10th anniversary. So like, there is no shortage of things for us to talk about throughout the duration of 2026. And then again, 27, Sarah, banger year incoming. I'm telling you.
We better cancel all our other plans because Star Wars is going to take over our lives again. It's fine. Anyway, I have a special thanks for our patrons who help us keep the lights on here. We do extra episodes on our Patreon, and we're just grateful for everyone who is willing and able to support us. So thank you to Andy, Brian, Cheryl, Chris, Clay, Deborah, Emma, Ian, Jennifer, Josephine, Katie, Knights of Ren, Krista, Logan, Lindsay, Matthew, Mark, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Skytalker, Soulcatcher, Tom, Travis, and Big Lift. Thank you so much for your support. And to thank you to everyone who takes time out of their day to join us in these conversations and have conversations with us about Star Wars. We're so appreciative. Thanks for being here. Hope you also love Andor. My recommendation is to not watch episode 12 again because you will cry loudly and like a baby, and then you'll feel sad about things. I'm not speaking from experience. That's it.
Hey, sometimes you need a good cry, and I might go do that right after this. So thank you all once again for listening, and until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.